I remember a time where World War II games were a dime a dozen. Specifically, one of my favorite World War II games of all time is Silent Storm. It was my first review on this channel, but for anyone who doesn't know about this game, it was a tactical turn-based strategy game released for the grand old year of 2003. Considering how much fun I had in that game with the various personalities you can have on your team and the World War II weaponry on display, I've been on the lookout for another game of a similar vein. That brings us to the recently released Forgotten but Unbroken. In today's game, you take control of a World War II camp as you complete various turn-based missions, as well as manage your base and maintain supplies throughout the campaign. Is it a solid strategy game in a genre devoid of modern World War II titles, or is it like the title and should just be ultimately forgotten? As a disclaimer, I did receive a free code from the publisher Microprose software. While I do appreciate the free code, it will not deter me from a fair and honest review. Sounds good? Let's begin. So you start up a new game, and I actually had to do a double take on this to make sure I got this right. Somehow, in some way, Elias Tufexis, aka Adam Jensen, voices the main character Martin Hupka and narrates some of the events prior to the game.
Once it's taken everything from you and you've got nothing to lose, there comes this glimmer of false hope that gives you so much strength.
I was already sold on this game before, but this took the game to a whole nother level. Elias is a great voiceover talent, so now I'm really excited to see where they go from a story perspective. So the first mission after the tutorial involves Martin fighting alongside his buddies Max Kobyleski and Karol Mazgrof against Germany. I almost wrote down Germanic forces like this was some sort of antiquity game, but I digress. This and several of the next missions will serve as a tutorial for how things work. I'll dive more on how combat works later in this review, but for the tutorial itself, it works well enough, but is surprisingly hard if you mess up. You basically have to kill several troops and book it as you are completely outnumbered. After the next two missions, Martin is given command of his own group of soldiers and now will have to manage being a commander on and off the field. For the overall narrative, it's very sporadic in terms of cutscenes that you'll see. The opening cutscene made it seem like the narrative will have a huge presence in this game, but it's more just set up for the game and when certain characters are introduced. It's a bit of a disappointment considering the great voice work on display here. Before I get more into the game flow, I will say that this game does a great job giving each soldier on your team some personality. You'll have the opportunity to recruit many characters along the way that are all uniquely voiced. There are even several that speak in their own native tongue, further helping to distinguish each soldier in your squad. They all have their own quotes too when they are performing various tasks, harkening back to Silent Storm's characterization at times. While the cast isn't incredibly colorful like in that game or in a game like Jagged Alliance, they still do a solid job overall. Alright, so now let's get back into the game and what you'll be doing for one half of it, and that is the base management. For base management, you'll have your set spots where you can build. At first, you start off with your main headquarters and a barracks for where your troops will sleep in. Along with the original trio of Martin, Max, and Karol, you are joined by three more soldiers in Simon Malinowski, Alvin Groot, and Alexander Starkanoff. These will fill the sniper, sapper, and soldier class respectively. More soldiers can be recruited from missions or by radioing the spy network. Several will also join you when certain dates are reached in-game. Managing your base is much more than just constructing and upgrading buildings with various resources. Another piece involves survival, such as making sure that you have enough food at all times and a decent wood supply during the winter. Diseases also happen, meaning that having the appropriate accommodations, such as showers and toilets, will help lower chances of your soldiers becoming infected. For food and wood, you can send your troops to go on expeditions with a % chance to receive these resources. The rest of the resources can be gained from missions as well as radioing the US, London, and the Soviet Union. Depending on your relationship with them will determine how much support you'll receive. It's actually quite difficult early on to manage as it's a bit unclear on what buildings you should build before your first winter. But once you figure that out and the right combination and how to preserve your supplies, it isn't too hard. If anyone is having trouble, feel free to comment below and I can definitely help you out. Similar to games like XCOM, you'll eventually get a mission to participate in. Unlike many other games of the similar ilk, all these missions are handcrafted, meaning they are not of the procedural generated variety. Once you select the mission, you can select up to a team of 6 people and equip them as you so desire. Similar to Silent Storm Sentinels, you even have the ability to swap out each character's outfit for another one. As minor of a feature, it is, I quite enjoy it as you can find some really cool looking outfits out in the wild. Early on, you won't have too much in terms of weapons and equipment to really help diversify your team. Most of your team will use the good old Mauser K98. Other iconic weapons such as the MP40 and the Springfield can be found throughout the game, so there are plenty of weapons to try out. And now we've entered the second half of the game, which is the combat phase. Most missions begin with you and your team in stealth mode. From here, you can just say screw it and start shooting like Danny DeVito, or you can sneak up on enemies and take them out one by one. Some missions will allow you to complete them in stealth mode, while others will eventually have you engage with the enemy at some point. The stealth mode works well, although it can be a bit frustrating early on, learning the patrol patterns of the enemies. Since this game is grid-based, it only takes a single square for you to be compromised and the alarm to start sounding off. I definitely reloaded many times during these parts. And once you get to the shooting, you get some very solid turn-based action here. Unlike many of these XCOM combat clones like to do, we got a good old AP system to play around with. When shooting, you can add more AP to each shot, harkening to that Jagged Alliance and Silent Storm style of combat. Unlike Jagged Alliance and similar to Silent Storm, you do get a hit percentage as well. While you can just stay in cover and take shots face to face with the enemy, it's best to flank them and be as creative as possible, especially early on. Flanking enemies not only increases the hit chance, but also provides a very nice damage bonus. Just be wary that you don't get flanked yourself, as it doesn't take much for your troops to go down. Outside of health, you'll also need to worry about the will of your units. If a unit is getting shot at constantly, he or she will panic and you'll lose control of that character for a turn. A unit can lose will regardless if he or she is taking any damage. The same can also apply to enemy soldiers, meaning a legit strategy is to keep shooting at an enemy unit even if the hit chance is low. This could potentially open up an opportunity for your characters to do some actual damage. This mechanic alone helps the game stand out amongst many other turn-based strategy games that I've played, and offers unique strategies and paths as a result. One of my favorite aspects about this game is the mission design. Since these missions are all handcrafted, there are some pretty awesome scenarios you can participate in. My favorite is an early one where you have to ambush a convoy and are given a mortar to blow up the enemies with. It's fun as hell and offers quite a bit of paths in terms of how to deal with the Germans. It's tough, but definitely enjoyable. And I have to say though, the difficulty can be a mixed bag for me. For some of the missions, especially the early ones, it can be downright brutal trying to just survive with minimal injury. Since medicine is hard to come by early on, you'll want to take as little damage as possible to make sure your soldiers are in good condition to fight in the next mission. I also didn't know this at first, but you should also build a hospital early on in order to prevent medicine from being wasted. I had to restart a few playthroughs early on just to get a hold of how to best manage the early game difficulty. Afterwards, when your characters get stronger and you get better weapons, it is a far easier experience. That's not to say, however, that the game becomes a cakewalk. You'll still be in pretty tough situations, especially the defense missions. If you have a sapper in your team, you'll get a chance to place some mines before battle and hope that the enemy will trigger them. You'll have to deal with waves and waves of enemies with very little downtime in between. If you're lucky, you will have an additional ally to help you along. If you're super unlucky, an elite named soldier will spawn in and give your guys plenty of trouble. And after every mission, each soldier will gain experience based on their deeds on the battlefield, as well as an experience bonus from just completing the mission. Once a character levels up, they can spend 1 perk point. The perk tree is determined by the character's class, falling under Commander, Medic, Heavy Gunner, Sapper, Soldier, and Sniper. Some of these perks can be incredibly powerful, like the Sniper's ability to instantly kill enemies once they reach a certain health threshold. While I found the Sniper class to be my favorite to play with, every class is very useful in their own way. The Sapper especially is very necessary in order to detect and disarm mines. Another problem I do have with this game is the amount of glitches. Because of the free code I have, I did get this game far before the official public launch. When this happens, it is normal to expect to see some glitches before day one, but not to the degree that I've witnessed. Most glitches I had were harmless, while others were game breaking, like the AI not being able to progress its turn properly for some reason. This is the only game developed by Centurion Development so far, so this may be due to a lack of experience on their end. Most of these issues are fixable though, so hopefully we can get a few hot fixes in the coming days. If I did have a few things I would like to suggest going forward is some sort of increase in enemy variety. You'll be fighting Nazi soldiers throughout the entire playthrough, which gets a bit samey after some time. Sure, there are several variations on these units, with standard infantry to more distinguished elite officers, but I would like to have seen other countries being featured, such as Italy, considering that this game begins in 1941. Your operations happen all throughout Europe, so it would have been interesting to have some missions take place there. Maybe a few assassination missions taking out key officers, or helping to prepare for the historical invasion of Sicily. Just talking about this makes it seem like a possible DLC, so maybe I just gave Centurion Developments a solid idea. Another one is a more minor one, but one that seems very possible given the way it's structured. After playing co-op campaigns in Jagged Alliance 3 and Wasteland 3, I would like to see more games embrace them. Co-op adds a lot to these games and adds a boatload of fun coordinating with a friend. They could go the Wasteland 3 route and have each person control 3 of the units, or the Jagged Alliance 3 route with the host assigning who gets which character. If you want to be a bit frisky, you can even add some PvP combat with the characters from the game, along with the possibility to use German units. I'm just throwing up some ideas here, but I can see multiplayer as a very fun addition. And before I wrap this up, I'll comment on some of the presentation aspects of the game. Considering this is a Unity engine game, I wasn't expecting much from a graphical perspective. While most of this game it looks fine given the budget, the facial animations and expressions in the loadout screen and in the combat are odd to look at. They all look weirdly and unintentionally cartoonishly expressive. For the sound design, it's actually quite solid, with each gun having quite a bit of impact on each shot. The music is okay for the most part, but nothing really memorable. It's the kind of music you would expect for a World War II video game. Overall, this is a very solid World War II turn-based strategy game, but nowhere near the level of Silent Storm in my opinion. The combat is fun but challenging, seeing your base expand is enjoyable, and the handcrafted missions are very fun. My main gripes are with the uneven difficulty with how punishingly hard the game is early on in every aspect, and the overall lack in polish in some areas. The former can't be fixed unfortunately, but I'm hoping to see a few more patches in the near future. This game is at $35 base price, but there is a 15% off promotion bringing the game down to $30. For $30 you can't go wrong with this title, although I would recommend to play Silent Storm if you're looking for a tactical World War II turn-based strategy game. You can get the gold edition for $10 on either Steam or GOG, and it is often on sale for 50% off. Either way, thank you for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.